So, Zombies Ate My Neighbours on the Super Nintendo, also available for Mega Drive, was a fun Halloween style game involving water pistols, shooting zombies and rescuing your neighbours. With solid graphics, not too bad of a soundtrack and some typical horror genre characters. You'll be rescuing babies, Bert from the barbecue, babes in the swimming pool, going to supermarkets and unlocking things. All done in a classic style like Smash TV, Total Carnage and Chaos Engine, and some later games like Loaded on the PlayStation. This version we're showing here is a Super Nintendo version. Seems a little bit smoother than the Mega Drive version with some better sounds down to the way the console was built, but both versions offer some solid gameplay. This game is definitely a classic worth playing over and over again and can be a little bit of fun. Although the gameplay is really basic, the storyline is simple. This goes back to a day where you were paying £40 for something with perhaps basic graphics, so it had to be enjoyable and it had to be kind of long for your money without relying on too much 3D stuff. This game can be a lot of fun and definitely has a lot of replay factor. There's a lot of secrets to find and levels are quite big in it as well. Also, there's some funky cameos and some really funky power-ups, like the ability to turn into a werewolf. Zombies Ate My Neighbours is well worth having a look at if you can get an emulator for either a Super Nintendo or a Mega Drive, and it's definitely worth having a quick play this Halloween. So let's talk Ghouls and Ghosts, Ghosts and Goblins, Super, PSP and arcade formats. So, originally known as Ghosts and Goblins, later as a sequel known as Ghouls and Ghosts, which is the one we're showing here. This one we've got here is the Super Nintendo version though, which is a lot later. To play the original version, you will have to get a Genesis version or a Sega Mega Drive emulator, depending on which country you live in. So, Ghouls and Ghosts and Ghosts and Goblins, very similar gameplay, a nice little platform game involving double jumping, powering up armour, special swords and a variety of scary creatures. The game is definitely not for beginners though, because the game is challenging from the start, whereas the PSP one takes a while to build up but is still a good challenge. Solid gameplay makes this game an instant classic and has been going on for years and years. The protagonist, Arthur, has also appeared in games such as Marvel v Capcom, Marvel v Capcom 3, and is still quite popular today. This game, however, was also responsible for another classic on the PlayStation 2 known as Maximum, and the sequel, Army of Sin. Ghouls and Ghosts is a basic story of a princess being kidnapped by an evil demon, and you have to go rescue it. Also, the demon at the beginning that you saw kidnap the Princess Firebrand has been involved in SNK vs Capcom and has his own game also available on the Super Nintendo that we will discuss at another point. Ghouls and Ghosts offers a wide variety of bad guys and challenges, but is not easily completed. A lack of a password or anything like that leads to many hours of frustration, although the Super Nintendo version of the game is well worth replaying just so you can experience it. However, alongside this, we'll be playing a legacy that started in the arcade, has been on Master System, PSP and many other consoles in very different forms. This is something of a cult classic game and shouldn't be sneered at, and if you can get it on a download for an emulator, it's well worth having a look at. I hope you enjoy Ghouls and Ghosts. So, Castlevania is one of those franchises that started way back when on the NES. It's attacked most of the major formats, including Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, DS, Super Nintendo, Mega Drive, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. And no doubt will attack the Xbox One and the PlayStation 1. Also on the Wii, and is available on many other formats such as PC Engine. Although this game started off as one of Nintendo's gems, it has grown in popularity and is definitely a cult classic. Castlevania features the most famous vampire of all, Dracula, and for most part you will be hunting him down on various different versions of the castle. However, you might say, isn't that a little bit boring? No, in each incarnation the castle changes. That's been worked into the storyline really well, and there's different periods of time. Some of them have more modern characters, some of them go right back to the beginning, and it works really well. However, I will say the Mega Drive version is probably one of the poorest out there, but still, as part of the franchise, is a very solid game. One of my favourites is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which was developed for the PlayStation 1 and is something of a cult game. It originally came with an art book and a music CD. This game is worth a lot of money intact with these two items with it. However, if you can't afford to do that, that is available as an emulator and is still very compelling. Also on the PSP release of Castlevania X, it is in there as an unlockable as well as a PC Engine version of the original. Castlevania Symphony Night is the first Castlevania game that allows for a little bit of free roam to an extent. Although this is done in Vampire Kiss on the PC Engine, it's not always clear. Most of the time is done by accident, by falling off a ledge at the wrong time, or purely by fluke. Castlevania is still going strong and made a big jump into 3D on the N64 console, but the games really weren't that great. However, the jump from 3D carried on with the PS2 and then finally hit big time on the Xbox 360 console and the PS3. Castlevania is one of those cult classics that will never die and is well worth a look on any of the consoles you've got. There will be a version available, even on mobile phones. The best way to enjoy it is by downloading the emulator, which for a Super Nintendo or an NES console, Game Boy Advance and DS. All Castlevania games are well worth a look at and is well worth investing your time in. Right, for our next set of game footage, we look to Medieval on the PS1. This game has a sequel and a reboot on the PSP known as Medieval Resurrection. This sees you control the knight Daniel Fortescue, who is killed during battle against evil forces. However, when evil forces return, he is forced to be resurrected, and a one-eyed skeleton-sized knight will take on hordes of zombies, scary creatures, and in the second one, even a prehistoric dinosaur in a museum. These games are highly enjoyable and are one of the few 3D platformers that really pushed the boundaries and made for good gaming back in the PlayStation era. Sadly, it never really made it onto the PS2 or the PS3, but the PSP version is very good and compelling. However, it would be good to see a next gen incarnation. On the whole, Medieval has a good soundtrack, good gameplay, and on the whole the graphics are still good even today. The PSP version, however, wasn't a great leap forward and takes full advantage of having such a small screen. It's good to see that some people still really love medieval, and many of the game's art, like his hand with his head attached to it, are still iconic and on many websites. It's good to see that there is still life in the old dog, and if you really want to have a look at it, download an emulator, and I highly recommend it.
We're meeting G over there. What?
So, House of the Dead 2, the franchise that started in the arcade, made its way onto the Sega Saturn PC, Dreamcast, made its way onto the Wii, the PlayStation 3 as a download. The franchise was based upon the idea that a mad scientist in a mansion developed a virus similar to that of Resident Evil, even stealing the design for the boss of Resident Evil and renamed it the Magician. House of the Dead is fun and fast, however the franchise took a bit of a turn with the latest House of the Dead series entry, House of the Dead Overkill, turning the franchise on its head as the prequel goes for more comedy and sexual content than gameplay. Rough looking graphics and a 3D option wasn't enough to really convince me. Although the game is fun, it would have been better as a separate project. I'm not sure what Sega were thinking when they did this, but back to the original series. The first game centers around a mansion with a secret lab, cliche. The second one is more about being in a city that's been overrun by zombies while trying to gather the agents together. It turns out, with some really bad script directing and storytelling, that the man behind it is Goldman. The House of the Dead series also led to a sideline project called Zombie Revenge, which no doubt I will cover later on in a zombie special of Straight Talk. The House of the Dead franchise has always been a light gun game and has spawned 2 films. The films, just like the games, are a bit of a cult classic but not exactly thrilling. However, House of the Dead 3 made real graphical advancements and pushed even the best laptops of the time, and had a cut down version for the Wii. It also made its debut on the Xbox, pushing the graphics to new limits and sounds. However, House of the Dead 4 has not been released commercially at home but has been released onto the PlayStation Store. House of the Dead 3 sees a post-apocalyptic world where zombies have taken over and one of the original characters from the game is missing. You must go in and rescue him and uncover the backstory. Resident Evil 4 is a prequel to 3 and follows on exactly from the events of House of the Dead 2, if not a little bit later, and sees the beginning of the zombie apocalypse and explains in more detail the fall of the AMS, the agency investigating zombies throughout the series. House of the Dead, although it isn't as gory as a lot of the Resident Evil and Silent Hill titles, is a lot of fun and reminds me a lot of the old zombie raid games. House of the Dead is a classic and can be enjoyed on most consoles out there today, or in an arcade that deals in classic Sega titles. This is one of the games that really reminds us that Sega had its heyday and was really a pioneer in the arcade industry.